For a NASCAR fan, this silly season is one of the most wonderful times of the year. A time that has seen earth-shattering moves that have made you drop your phone in public or make you stand there frozen, trying to process what has happened in the NASCAR world. And already in this season, we have seen moves that would have been seen as impossible 1, 2, or even 5 years ago. So just what other crazy out-of-the-box calamity is going to shuffle up the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series roster? It's time to dive into one of the most anticipated, most exciting videos of the 2021 NRF uploading season. Leading things off is of course the best team in NASCAR that has absolutely smoked the competition in the 23 races run so far, and that is none other than Hendrick Motorsports. It should be no surprise here that Rick Hendrick decided to open up a new container of ink and sign his new driver Kyle Larson to a long-term extension. The driver hailed as young money, he will not only race the iconic number 5 car made famous by Terry Labonte through the 2023 season, but guess what folks, it actually happened. That's right, the guy that used a racial slur has gotten his Camaro paid in full. Tally up a loss for cancel culture. The Hendrick Automotive Group gets the rights to 35 races, and Valvoline will pick up the other 3. And as a Chase Elliott fan, it's good to know that at the very least, the car Chase Elliott will likely be finishing second to a lot over the next 2 years will look beautiful, especially if Hendrick continues to run the old Ricky Hendrick paint job. And I'll tell you, that paint scheme is a classic looking car. No need to completely scrap the paint scheme for a modern looking number 5 car next year. Also signing a long-term deal is the breakout star of 2021, Alex Bowman. This guy had a tall order, proving to Ally at the start of the season that he's the guy, he's the man, he's the showman to continue the legacy of 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson. But with that, he had some big expectations, big shoes to fill, but fortunately, it turns out he fits the sneakers of one of NASCAR's greatest ever quite well. Stealing Richmond away from one of the greats at that track, taking advantage of a fantastic pit stop to continue the 48's legacy of dominance at the Dover Downs, and despite being down, he was never out at Pocono. Stealing away a victory from Kyle Larson in order to solidify his 2021 season, consisting of more trips to victory lane than his prior 189 Cup Series starts. And thanks to that success, thanks to that winning, the suits and ties at Ally have improved in a big way. And as a result, Alex Bowman is signed to this iconic car through the end of the Ally contract in 2023. So for the most part, the dominant Hendrick Motorsports team led by Rick Hendrick and Jeff Gordon, they can now turn their attention to not only the 2021 playoffs, but also the 2023 silly season. Because looking ahead to next year, there are some big names that have expiring contracts such as William Byron, and of course your defending NASCAR Cup Series champion Chase Elliott. This is going to be a big storyline in the first part of next year or until the contracts get signed. And if you want an early 2023 NASCAR silly season hot take, I think Chase Elliott is more likely to leave Hendrick Motorsports than William Byron.
What?
Moving across the garage, their rivals headed by Coach Joe are locked and loaded for yet another run at a full season next year. Really, the only question mark for Joe Gibbs Racing was with driver Denny Hamlin and sponsor FedEx. But this past February, both signed the paperwork necessary to remain at the team long term. It's unknown the very length of the deal, but I'd assume it's a 3 to 4 year long-term deal, going off the previous contract that was locked down ahead of the 2018 season before Denny Hamlin had one of his worst seasons in the NASCAR Cup Series. So with Denny Hamlin signing that deal, Joe Gibbs Racing now officially retains their big 3 consisting of Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. Sophomore driver Christopher Bell is still yet to be confirmed back, but there's no stressing for C. Bell over his job opportunities, at least not yet. Because with the way Ty Gibbs is performing, I don't think it'll be long before the seat of his number 20 starts heating up, as it does almost every single year regardless of driver performance. Finally, amongst NASCAR's big dogs, the 2022 silly season is perhaps the most intriguing, the most interesting for Trackhouse Racing, as this is a team that has absolutely tanked this year. They're having a downer year all across the board, whether it's the raw speed in these cars or having some of the absolutely worst luck that any team can possibly imagine. A nightmarish outcome indeed. Now, fortunately for Tony Stewart and Gene Haas, things don't appear to be as bad as the levels of Robert Yates Racing in 2006, as many of its drivers are locked in for the next season. Of course, franchise star Kevin Harvick is locked down through 2023 after signing that massive contract before the 2020 season. Youngsters Chase Briscoe and Cole Custer are also unlikely to go elsewhere, as both are seen as the core drivers of Stewart Haas Racing's future. The real question mark here relies with Aric Almirola, who finds himself once again racing for his career. Now, if this video were done in, let's say, July, in all likelihood, I'd have him out of the 10 car, because when you look at his first half to the season, it reminded me a lot of how Jamie McMurray and Dale Jarrett went out. All hope and optimism getting drained out both mentally and physically after the constant poor finishes. Plus, it seemed like the Aric Almirola tenure had went its course, especially with him having just one win at Talladega, might I remind you, in the 4 years he's been at Stewart Haas. But with one massive upset win in New Hampshire, Aric Almirola will be competing for a championship this fall, and above all else, proved he and this 10 team still have a lot of tread left to compete at the Cup Series level. At this point right here, it's really hard to see Tony Stewart passing up on free bacon and a driver with some newfound momentum. Thus, only one obstacle is left in the way: a brand new CEO. Those are the words absolutely no driver ever wants to hear, and we'll have to see just what happens to Smithfield, whether they decide to keep up the sponsorship or if they decide to pull a Lowe's or Dollar General and go cold turkey with their NASCAR sponsorship on their departure out of the sport, all while potentially ruining a driver's career in the process. Now, as for the Blue Ovals at Roush, their ongoing battle to reach the top of the NASCAR Cup Series garage has gotten a bit more interesting. Part of the reason is the re-signing of the 2015 Xfinity Series champion Chris Buescher, who I have to say has been a beacon of light for the Roush team this season in a big way. And thanks to further dedication from Fastenal, it looks like Buescher will have some more great opportunities to help Jack Roush's empire get back to the golden age. However, he isn't alone in this fight, at least when you consider a NASCAR sanctioned champion. Because for 2022, joining the team will be the 2012 NASCAR Cup Series champion Brad Keselowski. In fact, the last time that Roush Fenway Racing had a NASCAR Cup Series champion on his roster was the season Brad Keselowski won the championship when Matt Kenseth was racing his final season for the Cat in the Hat. But on to Brad Keselowski, he is a massive pickup as he's one of the greatest drivers in the 2010s, and he's still one of the top drivers still competing in the Cup Series garage. This guy right here is going to make a huge impact behind the wheel for this two-car operation. But that's not the icing on the cake, not at all. Because Bad Brad will also get a slice of the ownership pie at Roush effective January 1st of the new year. So guess what, guys? That officially means we're going to have a NASCAR team in 2022 consisting completely of cartoon characters, as we've got Horseface, the Cat in the Hat, and the real Mickey Mouse. For Darlington, they might as well just throw back to the old Cartoon Network team of the 1990s. So with signing a high-value champion like Brad Keselowski and retaining Chris Buescher, that officially leaves Ryan Newman as the odd man out. Now, there was a debate of running 3 full-time teams. However, considering the position Roush is in with just 2 NASCAR charters, there was just no room for the Rocket Man in a full-time capacity. There's still a chance Ryan Newman could come back on a part-time deal, which he is considering, but you gotta take into consideration this is a guy right here that wants to compete. And I think he still has some achievements in NASCAR he wants to check off of his career bucket list. Therefore, I cannot see a good reason as to why, as a competitive racer, he'd want to take the Bill Elliott or Terry Labonte route out of this sport, besides maybe spending more time with family. So the cards have fallen at Roush, but those only fell after some massive cards fell at the House of Penske. And that is, of course, Brad Keselowski, the driver that won Team Penske its first ever Cup Series championship, leaving the team. This is a driver right here that has done so much in his 11-year tenure, and he will go down as one of the greatest drivers to ever race for the captain. That right there are some tall shoes to fill, but quickly the iconic Blue Deuce has signed its new driver to hopefully compete for cups well into the next 1 to 2 decades. And that driver will be the defending Xfinity Series champion Austin Cindric. A scenario that would have found itself along the likes of Brandon Jones to the 19 in the Cup Series 3 years ago seems like the logical fit to the future prosperity of Team Penske in a big way. I mean, it's just hard to argue against him getting this opportunity. Have you seen this guy race on road courses in Cup this year? Austin Cindric could be a next-gen rookie next season and absolutely tear up the NASCAR Cup Series garage. And if the Penske equipment remains solid and you don't have a Chase Briscoe situation where the team falls off a cliff, this guy is going to be contending for a playoff spot at minimum. And something that's going to help is his rookie campaign likely getting a massive boost from corporate America. It was announced longtime sponsor Discount Tire is returning and is presumed to be the primary sponsor as they have the past 4 years. And not only will they sponsor Austin Cindric, but they will expand their sponsorship to the 12 car for a few select races next season. Speaking of Ryan Blaney, my, it's been yet another disappointing season full of underachievement all across the board. However, he will do so without his current crew chief Todd Gordon, who will seek a new adventure, possibly as a competition director of some sort at Team Penske next season. So now Roger and Tim Cindric have a tall order to once again try to boost Ryan Blaney and get him to the caliber that we see other young drivers like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Alex Bowman. My honest guess is that YRB gets reunited with Jeremy Bolins. Hard to think the guy can't succeed with Blaney again after working with one of the best drivers currently in the Cup garage, but let's see if it doesn't. I'm going to be honest, what do you expect? Ryan Blaney right now, he has a track record so far of being a one and done driver. And honestly, I'm done buying into the Ryan Blaney hype. I'm completely done with it. I'll start taking Ryan Blaney seriously when his team starts performing up to their potential and they actually look like the best team and driver alongside Joey Logano and get the job done. And so far, Ryan Blaney, this entire 12 team, they have a lot of work to get there. So thanks to Austin Cindric getting promoted to Penske, Matt DiBenedetto can officially sleep in peace, knowing he's the favorite to return to the 21. As when you look at the pipeline at Penske, there's no foreseeable competition, and now the question becomes just when does the deal get done and what are the high odds he returns to that famous Wood Brothers 21? And that answer right there is an incredibly surprising 0%. Absolutely correct. It will not be Matt DiBenedetto getting another season to prove himself in decent equipment, but instead, get this, Harrison Burton, yet another prospect Toyota groomed for years, will race for another manufacturer next year, thanks to Harrison Burton officially taking over the historic 21. A move made possible thanks to his dad Jeff Burton's tie to the Cup garage. Now this move right here, it shocked the entire series. Not only because Burton has really yet to hit his stride and break through in Xfinity, but for the Wood Brothers to make such a bold move. A team that has just one win and one playoff appearance in the last 4 years will depend on a rookie to get iconic win number 100 should the team go winless again in 2021. This is a very risky venture that will either see the Wood Brothers get their next-gen driver of the future or spend their Mondays almost every single Monday in the shop repairing the wrecked race cars that Harrison Burton will tear up every single Sunday. Interested to see how this one plays out. So as for good old Denny Benedetto, I mentioned it in his silly season feature and I'll mention it again. Nice guys finish last. Being a humble driver pays off only when you can win and gain the attention from corporate America. Matt DiBenedetto has a paper-thin list of people who actually want to get him into a competitive Cup ride. And with that, it's almost impossible to see DiBenedetto competing for a Cup championship next year. It is a growing reality everyone is starting to realize, even Matt DiBenedetto, as once off the table, DiBenedetto is now considering a stint in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which has some more options of his caliber than here in the Cup Series. Just maybe he ends up landing a spot at Penske or Stewart Haas, and if he can actually win a bunch of races, look like a John Hunter Nemechek or a Chase Briscoe, he can indeed claw back up to the most prestige garage in NASCAR. But by and large, the most coveted NASCAR free agent next year, still not locked in by one team, is the 2004 NASCAR Cup Series champion Kurt Busch. He seemed like a shoo-in to return to the Chip Ganassi Racing team, however Chip liked his big money in addition to his winners, selling his team and assets to Trackhouse. And with the transition, Kurt Busch then became the favorite to land in the team's second entry, with a deal expected to be signed, sealed, and delivered by at least mid-August. Instead, it turns out, Trackhouse Racing will build and field cars for Ross Chastain alongside Daniel Suarez, and take the elder Busch's number one he's put number one each of the past 3 seasons. And if you watched the Trackhouse video I did a month ago, I'm very sure you guys know what reaction is coming. Justin Marks and Pitbull, not gonna say they choked, but they fumbled this move like a football. This was their prime chance right here to get a NASCAR Cup Series champion to drive their equipment and also lock down some solid sponsorship. They also had a very big advantage compared to a rivaling pursuer we'll get to later by knowing they had 2 charters locked down for next year, and they could make a very strong pitch to both Kurt Busch and sponsor Monster Energy to get them on board. And yet they quickly chose Watermelon Man, who has Peanuts and Cracker Jack as his Cup accomplishments. Like the Wood brothers, this is another team with minimal success that decided to roll the dice on an unproven youngster. If Ross Chastain straight up doesn't become at least a playoff driver within the next 3 years, this move is going to age like Prairie Farms milk, as spoiled as the carton that got shuffled to the back of the refrigerator. So with Trackhouse exiting the Kurt Busch sweepstakes themselves, it may sound like this guy doesn't have a lot of options. Yet, according to Kurt Busch, it sounds like a deal has been made, but the announcement dates are still yet to be determined. So just what team is going to sign Kurt Busch to be that power forward, to be the guy that's going to slam dunk a lot of victories in the future? So far, it sounds like it's going to be the new Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan team 2311 Racing. A team that has been nothing short of disappointing all across the board, as to this date, they only have 1 top 10 on the year, which was due to fuel mileage. So it surely makes sense to sign a guy like Kurt Busch, who should get the car paid in full thanks to Monster Energy and potentially Mobile One or DraftKings to drive this second entry and help develop the team. A driver of his caliber is going to provide this team some answers. Whether the team just needed another year and a veteran driver to elevate the entire team forward, or if the problem is the guy driving car number 23. However, MJ, he needs to slam dunk a second charter before the move is made official. And right now, the NASCAR charter game, it sounds like it's going to be as chaotic as ever, with a lot of them being auctioned off this year. Of course, Trackhouse Racing is already a big winner, having obtained 2 charters from the Ganassi sale. KAULIG Racing also hit the charter jackpot by picking up 2 of the 3 charters from Spire Motorsports. And as of this video, Matt KAULIG and crew are planning to run 2 full-time cars next year. The number 16 for Xfinity star Justin Haley, and a second car likely using a rotation of drivers. Guys like Kaz Gralla, AJ Allmendinger, Jeb Burton, or maybe even a Noah Gragson or Zane Smith could get some cup starts in this second entry. However, when determining the 36 teams that are going to have charters, or they're going to be locked into every single race next season, it is going to come down to 2 teams. A team that's going to have a lot of eyes on them over the next couple months is Ware Racing. It's pretty clear NASCAR fans and even some IndyCar fans know all too well that Rick Ware can officially go out to Texas Roadhouse and also come home to a cold pillow every single night for the rest of his life. Thanks to buying out some of the assets of teams like Premium Motorsports, the RWR team has fielded 4 cars with no worries about going home, despite being some of the slowest cars in the field, and in the case of the Daytona 500, taking up spots that would have been more competitive had it been awarded to a team like the Gaunt Brothers Racing Team or Beard Motorsports. But to the fortunes of almost every single NASCAR fan, the Ware Racing team seems more interested in putting together a quality product on the racetrack rather than the one of quantity like we've seen over the past year. As stated by Cody Ware at the Nashville Grand Prix, the plan is to scale back to 1 or 2 cars. There's no question if he sells off his charters, he's going to make some big money. Now, with the crazy world of NASCAR charters, Ware Racing in fact doesn't have control of all 4 of the charters it used this season. One of which was leased out by Richard Petty Motorsports, and by rule, RPM will get the charter back considering that leases can only last for up to 1 year. And for the Richard Petty Racing team and the dire state it's in once again, I doubt to the greatest extent that this team runs a second car. After all, Erik Jones has yet to be confirmed to RPM for 2022, and the team still has a massive chunk of sponsorship unsold for its flagship number 43. No questions asked, the second Petty charter will be sold or leased out by a team next season. Therefore, this officially leaves at least 2 charters to be fought for, potentially amongst 4 teams. 2311 will be one, the new GMS Cup team will be another. However, not much is known about this team in the case of how many races they're going to do and who's going to drive this entry. Many say it's going to be Sheldon Creed or Zane Smith, but I highly doubt either are willing to risk career suicide to race for a team with no Cup experience. Therefore, it makes much more sense to bring in a paid driver should they go the full-time route to help ensure they've got the money to get through at least the first season, one that's going to have a lot of growing pains in climbing the NASCAR ladder. Another team that could be a dark horse in the NASCAR charter fight is JTG Daugherty Racing. Yes, they sold their charter last year, and yes, Ryan Preece and this 37 team have had a lot of question marks surrounding whether they can go the distance, considering sponsorship has been down compared to 2020. But considering the long-term contracts from Busch's Baked Beans and Edelman's Donuts, I think that indicates that this 37 car will be around next year, and hopefully they will end up getting back into the charter game with the racing costs going down next year. And then the final team in the mix for a charter, one that's been bombarded with questions about when are they going to make the step up to the Cup Series. They've been asked this for the past decade. But in 2021, a question that has been a joke for many years has finally become a serious question that many NASCAR fans are just waiting to hear the answer of. Will Junior Motorsports move up to Cup? Dale Jr. and Kelly Earnhardt, they have pondered over this idea all season long with the next-gen car and its cheaper racing cost. But with just 191 days until the Daytona 500, some decisions will need to be made, and soon. Things like who is going to fund this ride, and just what driver do you get in this type of situation. Especially when you have a pool of drivers ranging from the new kids in the garage like Noah Gragson and Josh Berry to the experienced drivers with money in Justin Allgaier and Michael Annett. And that is just one of the many questions left unanswered in the puzzle to the 2022 NASCAR roster. What will the Front Row Motorsports team look like in 2021? Will the BJ McLeod team continue to build for the future? And just how many drivers and cars will be competing for the season championship, especially in a silly season right before a brand new car is set to take center stage? So now it's time to get to the part of the video that you guys have been waiting for, or the part that you guys skipped over to get to. Predicting what gladiators will be racing these 200-mile-per-hour chariots beginning with a Great American Race. I know typically in this situation we're supposed to lead off with 1, but in this situation we're going to lead off with 0, as I think Starcom Racing remains in the Cup Series, and they also decided to keep Quinn Half. When creating the 2022 roster, I was debating to put a guy like Kaz Grau or even Ryan Preece into this ride, but in the end none of these choices make any sort of sense. Because at the end of the day, what a lot of people forget when it comes to these cars is that there are a lot of drivers that would rather take a competitive Xfinity or truck ride than a Cup ride like this. Quinn Half, meanwhile, is fully willing. So therefore, it's really hard to see him getting the axe, especially after Starcom Racing. They sacrificed it all by getting rid of Landon Castle and putting Quinn Half, their driver of the future as they called him, into the 00. Going from one Chevrolet team to another, the Spire Motorsports team, meanwhile, will stick with Corey LaJoie as he continues to stack his pennies high. Possibly now as a one-car team, now putting all the energy into that 1-7 team, it might just make them elevate to the next level and get them closer to the top 25 in points. Meanwhile, after a decade of frustration for many fans, the Junior Motorsports team will buy a charter and become a full-time Cup Series team with breakout star Josh Berry. His quick rise to stardom will be met with 4 to 5 solid sponsors for the Tennessee native, and thus the new JRM Cup team has the talent and the money to grow and thrive in a competitive Cup environment. Also a bit of a shock here, the Junior Motorsports team will not run the 88, but rather the 15. Dale Earnhardt Jr. loves his history, and the 15 works not only for all the years he was at DEI racing the 8 alongside Michael Waltrip's 15, but it was a number driven by his dad in the early part of his career. A historic number now in a competitive role. As for page 2, we get to some even bigger moves, and the first involves the GMS 26 as Chase Purdy, yes, that Chase Purdy, will be the primary driver of the uncharted GMS entry. What a lot of people glance over in this situation is the Bama Buggy sponsorship. They funded his career all the way, whether it was his Cars late model races with Lee McCall, his first ARCA start with Mason Mitchell, or of course his entire truck season with GMS this year. For a team that has struggled with finding sponsorship, Purdy will be valuable for GMS in their inaugural season. Another shocking move is Ryan Newman, the Rocket Man, taking over the 37 for JTG. this car will be considered a bit of a downgrade, but the JTG cars are still competitive, and the two will unite together to hopefully better the team's performance and just maybe compete and have an outside shot at next year's playoffs. As for the guy who replaced, Ryan Preece, I honestly think he's going to take the John Hunter Nemechek route next season and take a competitive offer for a championship contending truck or Xfinity team. Thus, like Matt DiBenedetto, he will not be in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. Meanwhile, the Richard Petty Motorsports team decides to re-sign Erik Jones, as it's hard to really see Richard Petty cutting ties with a former Joe Gibbs Racing driver after just one season of development. It's also hard to argue against Kurt Busch driving for Michael Jordan, especially after Trackhouse completely missed the net with this guy. I think in the end he'll sign a multi-year deal to keep him racing until his age matches his car number. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. returns to JTG, Cody Ware returns to Rick Ware, of course, and the final thing of note is that Kaz Grala will be the primary driver of the number 61 entry for KAULIG Racing. This is a very underrated driver right here that could use a big break. And with 10 to 20 races in the second KAULIG car, he has some good chances to make some noise. So in total, there will be 36 charter teams and 2 open cars, which will be the GMS entry and one of the Rick Ware Racing teams. A competitive NASCAR Cup Series field from the likes of Joe Gibbs Racing to Starcom Racing, and a roster of drivers and teams that will put on a show like always. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.